Hey folks, this is Pastor Kyle with a 5-minute video for this week for chapter 5 in the Magnificent Story. The chapter is titled Embracing Our Goodness. Let me start with a question for you. Do you know that you are very good? You are made to be very good. Now, I know a lot of people will say, yeah, but you don't really know me. I'm really not very good. Maybe I was made that way, but I'm definitely not. That was the problem with Rich Mullins in the chapter, James Bryan Smith's friend, who knew he was a sinful person. And he opened up to James about his inadequacies, his failures, and let himself be really known. And it makes me wonder, how often does our own shame, our own self-criticism about who we really are, how often does that keep us from truly being known? How often do we hide ourselves from other people because we're ashamed of who we are? In this chapter on embracing our goodness, James Bryan Smith wants us to think again and to think differently about how we see ourselves. And of course, he wants us to align how we see ourselves with the magnificent story, which is about our goodness. In the chapter, James quotes that sin is not our identity. Our identity is to be people who reflect the glory of God. That's what we're made for. And somehow in our lives, we've convinced ourselves that really our identity is that we are wrecked, that we are not good, that we are sinful people. That's who we are. That's our identity. And we tell ourselves that our humanness and our limits and our inadequacies are bad things and they need to be overcome. That's the tone of our culture. But what if that is actually the sinful mentality that we need to get rid of? James Bryan Smith isn't saying that sin is not serious. It is. But he is saying, rather, that maybe turning away from our goodness, ignoring our goodness, maybe that's where sin begins. When Adam and Eve were first created, they were created as very good. That's what the scripture text says. And in that story, their goodness is not in their perfection. In fact, the story never says that they are perfect. Rather, their goodness is in their creatureliness, in their vulnerability, in their created limits as people made to reflect God, but yet human. Our goodness is in our humanity that's limited and inadequate. And in the story, Adam and Eve aren't trying to cover up their humanity. They're not trying to hide from it. They embrace their natural goodness. It says that they're naked and they're unashamed. They're not trying to cover anything up. And in that, they were the image of God. And it's not until they turn from that and try and create something else that things go sideways. They assumed that they were not very good and tried to do something about it, and that's when sin came in. I wonder if our default to assume that we are just rotten sinners who have fallen away from perfection, I wonder if that's the thing that keeps us from seeing the goodness that we're made from. Yes, the power of sin is real. But it's clouded our ability to see the goodness, the very goodness that we have made in us. The beautiful and magnificent story that James Bryan Smith is drawing attention to in this chapter is that we are made very good. We are made as the image of God. And our original goodness is not something that is in perfection, but it's in our creatureliness. It's in our limitedness, in our vulnerability. That's where our goodness lies. And so our limitedness, our creatureliness, our vulnerability is not something we need to overcome. That's where our goodness lies. And so maybe what we need to hear is the magnificent story that we are made very good to begin with. And that sin maybe has clouded our vision, like the clouds outside, yet the sunlight still shines through. Our goodness is still there. And forgiveness, what Jesus Christ offers us, is to see ourselves again as we were made, as very good, because that's how Christ sees us. That's what he draws out of us, so that we might live fully again as humans, limited, vulnerable, made for one another and made for God. When that's our starting point, then maybe we're not afraid to be fully known. And maybe we can see that we were made to be very good. And our goodness, that's our identity. That's the magnificent story.